We're doing this a bit quick and dirty because I was slow to the uptake on this one, and this is more of a PSA than any in-depth video on this kind of thing, which is why it's absurdly short by Luxon standards. But first, happy birthday Xenoblade X Definitive Edition! I think that's an important thing to shout out. I'm glad X is on the Switch, I'm glad more people get to play X, I'm glad more people are falling in love with X, and I hope that if you have not tried it, you will now that I'm telling you to. TLDR for the main topic of the video, if you have a Switch 2 and intended to play any Switch 1 Xenoblade game in handheld mode ever, update your system, go into the settings, enable the new handheld boost feature, sit back, and enjoy portable Xenoblade the best it's ever looked. For those of you unaware, handheld boost is a new feature the Switch 2 OS added in an update a few days ago that allows your Switch 2 to act like a docked Switch 1 when playing Switch 1 games in undocked mode. This is not increasing the maximum performance of games in any way, and it does not affect docked mode at all, but in handheld, it does effectively give a whole bunch of Switch 1 games performance or resolution bumps. At first, you may think this is only significant for games that have a docked resolution of over 720p, as they're no longer bound to the limits of the Switch 1 screen. And yeah, the Switch 1 version of XDE does look fantastic running in native 1080 as opposed to 720 stretched out to fit that screen, but the improvements for the numbered games are arguably even more impressive. Recent complaints about XDE's Switch 2 edition undocked were not the first time undocked Xenoblade games met with a lot of criticism, as barring the Switch 1 version of XDE, all of the Xenoblade games had very aggressive dynamic resolution, especially when undocked. 2, 1DE, and 3 all target a native resolution of 720p when docked, though the dynamic resolution can go as low as the low 500s, while 540 is actually the high end of the dynamic resolution in handheld, with especially Xenoblade 2 being notorious for dipping below standard definition in combat with a lot of enemies or visually busy areas. All this is dramatically improved with boost mode enabled. Not only has the dynamic resolution range shifted because the previous ceiling is now basically the floor, but in order to conserve power, handheld mode also decreased things like LOD ranges and lighting quality, so those are also improved as well. On top of that, like it always has, the Switch 2 is using its raw power over the Switch 1 to brute force better performance, so you're going to see a more consistently high resolution and better frame rate than a docked Switch 1. Though admittedly, because of the boosting, there aren't as many resources going into the frame rate itself, so you may see more frame drops than a non-boosted version of the same game, though it will ultimately be better than the Switch 1 regardless. I might just be getting placebo affected by this part, but it even seems like the way it's displaying sub 1080p images has been improved as well. As in, it's acting like a docked Switch 1 outputting less than 1080p on a 1080p screen, as opposed to stretching out a Switch 1 output to fit the larger and higher resolution Switch 2 screen. I'd say the most noticeable improvements out of the 4 games are in Xenoblade 2 and 1DE, as by the time 3 came around, Monolith had drastically improved their sampling and upscaling techniques, so it never looked quite as bad in handheld as the first 2 did. And while XDE's bump is noticeable and very good looking, it is going from 720 to 1080, while the other games are going from less than HD to HD at all. Well, admittedly, this is in part due to me not having good enough equipment to show it off properly. I didn't need to record any new footage for this video. All you've been seeing is stuff I recorded off of my Switch 1, because that's just what it looks like handheld on the Switch 2's tiny screen now. If anything, it will look better due to slightly more consistent frame rates and the lack of YouTube compression. It doesn't bring frame rate buffs, but this is almost mini Switch 2 editions for all 3 numbered Xenoblade games, albeit limited to handheld. That's how big the improvements are. If anything, it just makes me even more depressed at the current state of XDE Switch 2 edition, as while that does boast a pretty consistent 60 FPS, the upscaling, especially in handheld, is so bad that, as someone who played more than a few hours of the original X on the Wii U gamepad, I'm not quite sure which one looks worse visually. I don't want to make this into another complaint video, but in handheld at least, I think the proper native 1080p is much more worth it than the 60 FPS with Vaseline visuals. Now, this video is focusing on Xenoblade because that's what this channel is primarily about, but the improvements are for every Switch 1 game. It's not just the Xenoblade series. Sure, they're all games renowned for their visuals that are also notable for being very hampered in handheld mode on the Switch 1, but docking them never did anything like uncap the frame rate. There are several prominent Switch 1 games that cap at 30 handheld and move up to 60 docked, and you could just get 60 in handheld now. Basically, if you have a Switch 2 and you play it on handheld a lot, try out all your Switch 1 games. You might be pleasantly surprised a few different times over. As for me though, I think this is going to be my only general Nintendo news video for a hot minute, unless the XDE Switch 2 edition gets a day 1 patch for the physical, or there's a general direct sometime soon, which I kinda hope there is, because they haven't been doing a great job of selling me on the Fire Emblem game that's supposed to be coming out this year, and I also think next direct is the first chance we have at seeing a new Xenoblade. Till then though, this is Luxon, signing off.